And your volume's up so you can hear if there's anything going on.
Yes. She said it on social 805.
Oh, is that what she said?
Yes.
Are you excited?
So excited.
I want to let me present. Click slide. Oh. Okay, everybody. Welcome to Maximizing Your College Visits. This is Roxana here from College Calm, and I have Jenny here as well, and we're going to present to you sort of the quick and dirty version of everything you should know before you go on a college visit. There is a lot to think about. There's a lot of planning that goes into it. We're not going to talk about sort of how to plan the visits. Certainly, if that's something that you want help with, you can reach out to us. This is really about, you've made your visits, you've got some plans for spring break. What are the best things that you can do, and how can you best use your time when you go and visit colleges? So with that, we are just going to get started. So the first question that I get actually quite a bit is, why do we need to visit? Can't we just visit once my student gets in to a certain school, and then we can really decide whether that's the right place for them? That actually, I think, is important as well. I think it's important to visit when you're making those decisions, but I also think it's really important that students get out there and visit colleges, even starting as early as their sophomore year, just to start to get a sense of what they connect with. You know, it's the best way that you can test drive what this college thing is all about. There's a lot of students that come into our office that, you know, sort of say, what campuses have you been on? And many of them will say, oh, well, maybe I went to a football game here, or maybe they've been to their parents' alma mater. Some of them actually haven't been on any campuses. And it's really interesting when you talk to students about college, because a lot of their notions about what college is and how it works actually come from movies and TV. So I think it's really important. It doesn't have to be far. There's plenty of places to go and visit close by and within driving distance. But I think it's really the only way that students can start to really get an understanding of what is this whole college thing? Why should I be excited about this? And how is it different from what I'm experiencing in high school? I also think it's really important that you go on campus and observe it for yourself. It's very different reading in the Fisk Guide about a student culture versus actually being on a campus and observing student interactions, maybe checking out and seeing what a class looks like, and looking at the students, what they're doing, where they hang out, I think is a really big part of a college decision for students. And it's actually not just, you know, those specific things, but what is it like all around campus? Where are the dorms in relation to the cafeteria? What does the town look like on the outside of campus? I think those are all important things that students can do. The other thing is to learn more about academic programs. I will be honest with you, schools are changing their academic programs all the time. And oftentimes their websites are keeping up and sometimes they're not. That it's a good idea to go and see how are things organized. Can you go to a school and do what you want to do and learn the things that you want to learn, even if it's not set up in the exact way of a particular specific major that you want. It's a good time to ask some of those questions and to really kind of look at the school holistically. I was just in North Carolina and Georgia about 10 days ago and saw 10 colleges in 5 days. And I was really taken by how many colleges are now, they're counting as their new major, are offering data analytics. And that's not necessarily something that you're going to get from reading the FISC guide. Things like, neuroscience is popping up, or specialties in biology and a lot of different things. So it's a really good thing to do when you're visiting. You can check out different academic programs. You also can ask your specific questions. We're going to talk more about this later. And in fact, we have a list of probably 40 questions that students can ask. And one of the things that we do with them in our office is to go through those questions and say, okay, which are the ones that you're the most interested in knowing when you go on your college visit? And we try to break it down so that students are asking specific questions about the things that they're really interested in. And then the last piece of it is that going on a college visit and going to a college, making the trip, showing up, signing in, going on a tour does demonstrate your interest in the college. And I'm going to talk actually at the end a little bit more about demonstrated interest, what schools it works and is really important for, and also some schools where it doesn't matter quite as much. But that's something, a visit is considered one of those things that demonstrates interest.
Okay, so there are like 5 things that we narrowed down to do before your actual visit. One of which is do some initial research. Now, you don't have to know everything, all of the ins and outs about the college, how many people go there, that kind of thing. But generally, I think generally speaking, knowing about what major options they offer and making sure that they have a major that you might be interested in before you just go on campus. And the other thing that you can do is look over their website and read about those majors in case any questions pop up, things like, can I take classes in different majors, or am I only allowed to take classes within my certain major? Can I explore areas outside of my major? The other thing that I think is really helpful is to look at the supplemental questions from the year before. So if a college has additional questions that they ask, like, how does our curriculum align with your goals? Or tell us why Carnegie Mellon, right? Before you take that visit, when you have that in your head, you can think about what the answer to those questions while you're actually on campus and be able to take specific notes. A lot of times those supplemental questions don't change that frequently. They may update them or have a different version, but I think it's really helpful to kind of know what they're going to ask you before you step on campus. The other thing that you can do is to personalize your visit, is to email the local admissions counselor or the regional representative. Since we have a big country, a lot of times they have certain admissions representatives or local regional representative for our specific area. So if you email that person before you visit, sometimes they can set you up with an interview or help you arrange a class visit. And it also shows that demonstrated interest that Roxana was just talking about. So being able to personalize your visit a little bit. Third, if you are planning on playing sports, or people that go there, or you want to know a little bit more about a specific department, or you're in a specialty major such as music or dance or something like that, it might be helpful for you to contact coaches or department heads or professors within those areas, or even current students, so that you're able to connect with those people on campus. Fourth would be to prepare. So after you've done this initial research, you've emailed your counselor, you've connected with these people, preparing that list of questions that you want to ask that's specific to the school. Maybe you have 3 general questions and then 3 that you ask at every college visit, and then some that are more specific to the school that can't be easily found on the website. And then lastly, schedule. So look at your time and think about whether or not you want to audit a class or a specific or go on a specific tour of a department. So if you're trying to compare the engineering department between, you know, a place like Carnegie Mellon and UC Santa Barbara, you can kind of compare and contrast that visit or through your visit. But these are things that you have to think about before you go and schedule that time so that you're able to maximize that visit.
Yeah, I would just say too, a lot of times families or students will say, well, how do I know what's offered? Sometimes you have to ask. So the website is really the first place to go. I have been having a lot of success for schools that have sort of online chats. Just starting up an online chat and saying, you know, do you do interviews for prospective students? Is it possible for me to sit in on a class? You know, the different things that you might want to do on campus, that sometimes you have to ask for it. And I also wanted to go back to the personalized piece. The regional representatives, there's a whole group. It's called RAC, Regional Academic Counselors of California. And actually, if you just Google that, you will get their page. And those are all folks that are basically housed somewhere. They live somewhere within California. Sometimes there's a couple that are in Colorado, but most of them are in California. And they are admissions officers for schools that are not in California, right? So if you're interested in Elon and there's a regional rep that actually resides in California and specifically deals with California students. And so those regional representatives are really good about getting back to students. And a lot of times they will FaceTime or do in-person interviews when they're in the particular area. The thing is that you have to ask. A lot of these things you might look on their website and it says nothing about it, but sometimes you just have to ask the question. So we put together just an idea of some questions that you might want to ask. A lot of times students and families schedule to go on a tour with a student, which I think is probably the most useful use of anybody's time. And a lot of times there's also information sessions. If you only have time for one, I would actually choose to do the tour with the student. I think you just get a much more realistic picture. If you're able to do both, that's great. I would say about 50% of the information session typically covers stuff that you can find online about the specific application process. So when there's a tour guide, I was talking with a student and they said, so what, do I just badger them with questions? And my answer was, no. And you don't have to ask all your questions, you know, all at once or in the big group. You know, there's plenty of time on tours. I promise. I went on 10 a couple of weeks ago. There's plenty of time that the tour guide's just kind of walking and you can just walk up to the front and ask them a question. Now, do you want to ask them 5 in a row? Probably not. Sometimes they actually will cover some of the things you want to know just in the tour. So things like, why did you decide to come to this school? I think is a question that really helps students understand what sets that school apart, right? Every one of those tour guides had more than one choice, most likely, in what school they chose to attend. So they have a reason why they chose the school. And so I think it's really interesting to ask that question just to see what their process was like when they made their final decision. Another thing that I think goes overlooked quite a bit is what does the school do for freshmen? Is there a 2-day orientation in the summer where they get all their, you get all your classes and you meet all the other freshmen? Are there, service trips or outdoor programs for a week that you can do with other freshmen before school starts? Is orientation right before school starts? So you just go to school a week early, and is it a week long? Is it a day long? I think it's important for students and families to think about what does this transition look like and what is this school doing in terms of the transition. And I'm not saying that in any values-ridden way. It's nice for families to know what to expect. Another question is about how do students interact with faculty inside and outside of the classroom. A lot of times tour guides will touch on this, but I think if students really do care about building relationships with faculty, they need to ask that question to figure out, are the faculty accessible? And are they the kind of faculty that are just there for office hours, or they send people to their graduate students, or are they the type of faculty that will, ask kids to go to coffee just to talk about their future? Do students tend to stay on campus on the weekends? I think anyone who's thinking about traveling far away, from California, either it's, in Southern California or across the country, you kind of want to know what people are doing on the weekends. And if the answer is that everybody goes home, that's something that you need to be prepared for. And also understanding what goes on campus. What's the good stuff going on campus, and what happens off campus. I think if you ask this question, for the most part, the tour guides are pretty honest about, what it's like off campus and what's going on. The other thing is about the Greek system. There was a lot, when I was on my trip, there was a lot of asking about the Greek system, and a lot of times people just ask, what percentage of students. And I would say that if you're going to ask the question, we can find the percentage online. That's not really one that I think is really worthwhile asking. I think probably what's more important to ask is, what is Rush like, right? Does it happen before school starts freshman year? Is it delayed so that you do it second semester of freshman year and everybody lives in the dorms that first semester? Do students live in the houses as freshmen? Or when can they live in the houses? And what happens if you don't get the place that you want to go? What happens then in terms of that? I think those are much more important questions to ask.
So then here are some questions to think about when you are in those information sessions with the admissions representatives. As Roxana kind of touched on, a lot of this information you can find on their website. So sometimes I think what's helpful in these admissions sessions or the information sessions is to kind of find out what they're expecting on any changes on campus, maybe what they're looking for when they're reading your application, and those kinds of things. These are also a great time to ask some of your specific questions, and if there isn't enough time in the information session to ask your specific question, a lot of times those admission representatives hang out for a couple extra minutes so that you can ask more specific questions. One of my favorites that I always go to when I sit in those information sessions is, what impresses you most about a student's application? And when we talk about this, I think about this in terms of, are they looking for students who are going more in depth into one or two activities, or are they looking for a student that maybe has a breadth of knowledge in different areas? Are they looking for the most rigorous coursework, or the best grades in coursework that the student can handle? All of these things are important, and schools have differing opinions on this, I found. So what impresses you most about a student's application, I feel like, is a great question for a student to ask. Another question that I find that is not often found on the website is, what changes do you see taking place on the campus in the next 5 years? You will hear a lot of admissions representatives talk about any new construction or new buildings that are coming, or if they're building a new science wing, those kinds of changes. And then maybe even some up and coming majors that they are starting to develop that may have a new, assignment, if that makes sense. So maybe they're enhancing it, or they're adding more students to that area of study, or they're taking money and putting it in a certain direction. So I think that is a really nice thing to ask, because you're going to be on that campus in the next 5 years. So what will your experience on that campus look like, and what do you have to look forward to? Is there a new rec center or new sports fields, things like that? I love this question. I ask this all the time. Are the admission standards higher for certain majors? So if you're thinking strategically about applying to that school and applying to certain majors, you want to know if you should be taking the SAT subject test if you're majoring in math, or if you need to be taking AP Calculus BC instead of AP Calculus AB for business. And so I think those kinds of questions can only help you in the application process.
And I would add that the other question is, how much is major a factor in your application process? It's just a different way of asking that question. I think every year students stress about what they're going to put as their major. And when you go and actually ask the schools, there's a lot of schools that actually do not even look at what a student is majoring in when they're making an admissions decision. So I think it's really important to figure out, and it's part of what we do when we go, is it important or is it not important? Do we need to stress over which major it is, if it's business or engineering or, or political science or economics, or, or does it really not matter that every freshman is going to be kind of going through the same process and that they don't have to designate until later? There's some schools that basically admit by major or by school. And then there's other schools where you can really do whatever you want for the first year and a half in terms of trying a lot of different stuff.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And even it varies within the UC system and private schools as well. So I think that's really important to think about. And will your application be changing for the next year, and when will it be live? That's really nice to know, just so you can get a head start on the application over the summer. And so we're not looking at last year's questions in the middle of the summer when they're going to be changing for the next school year. And then this is my last, tidbit of advice, is to get the contact information for our counselor in charge of Northern California. I have had students email their admissions representative from certain schools to ask them questions about the application we can't figure out, or again, like what Roxana said about the certain majors and stressing over that. And I think it's just really helpful to have that information so that you can either email and say, I was on campus and I really loved it, or I have this specific question. And again, that kind of comes into, showing that demonstrated interest.
Great. Okay, so now you've made it to campus. And I really tried to narrow it down to 5 things, but we've got 6. Okay, so one thing you need to do, go to the cafeteria. Get a coffee, a hot chocolate, a muffin. I think that the cafeteria is a really good place to check out the school culture. I was just out of school, and I was in the cafeteria and looking around at students, and it was much more, it was like a lot more diverse than I was expecting this particular college to be. And then I saw on my way out, there were backpacks everywhere. And I thought, okay, maybe the kids aren't allowed to bring their backpacks into the cafeteria. But they were up the stairs, like around the corner, they were everywhere. And I also noticed that the students didn't have devices. For the most part, they were just hanging out and talking at lunch. And when I asked one of the students about it, they said, oh yeah, well, we have an honor code. And with that honor code, our campus is super safe. So we don't take our stuff into the cafeteria, and it's totally perfectly safe. We do all kinds of experiments. We leave $20 on the backpack to see if anybody's going to take it, and nothing has ever happened. So by going to the cafeteria and observing, you actually can learn a lot about sort of the student culture. You got to take notes about things that you notice. Take notes or take pictures. You don't have to take notes on everything. And I would say, that the average SAT scores and, you know, most popular majors and all of those things that we can find online are not as important as really things that catch your eye. Is there a poster for an event that you actually might want to attend? Is there, you know, something new that's happening on campus, or a club that you know, they have a radio station and that's something that you might be really involved in. Or they talk about a study abroad program that's in New Zealand doing community health, and that is just for you the best thing you could possibly think of. So you don't have to take notes on everything, but take notes on the things that strike you, because you're going to use those notes either in a why do I want to go to Northwestern, or why do I want to go to Davidson, or you might end up having an interview. And it's great to be able to say, when I was on campus, this is what I noticed, and this is why I know that I want to go to this school. Now, there's two schools of thought here. You can take notes. We actually have little notebooks that we're giving students that they can take on their college visits to write little notes. You can also take notes on your phone. The problem with taking notes on your phone is that it looks like you're texting. So if you're going to take notes on your phone, don't spend the whole time on your phone. Or, you know, if you're close to the tour guide, just be like, I'm just taking notes. Because you don't want it to be a situation where they feel like you're not paying attention to them, when in fact you're paying a lot of attention to them. Make sure you walk or drive around campus. So not just on campus, but what happens right around campus. Sometimes that's a great place to go get lunch, or just, you know, take the extra 10 minutes to ask a student where do kids go off campus, and see how close it is. A lot of the questions that we get in our office is about, well, what's the town like? And you know, what do students do? And how do they get around? And so that's all things, even if you just drive around the perimeter, students really connect with, oh, well, there's, you know, a Jamba Juice, or there's a cool record store, or, you know, there's a Target. Depends on kind of what you're into, but you want to kind of check out that area. And a lot of times, if you're spending the night, you know, make an effort to kind of you know, try to find a hotel that's close to campus. So take pictures. I think that that's really good to, you know, when students come back, to kind of jog their memory. I have to tell you, when I was on all these visits, and this is definitely not my first rodeo, I took a ton of pictures, and I walked away going, you know what? I bet I could find much better pictures online if I just Googled the college name and went to photos. So my suggestion here is to take pictures of, you know, that of a particular thing that strikes you, whether it's a freshman dorm that you just thought was super awesome and you'd want to live there, or again, a poster of, you know, a light up the night event that caught your eye, or I was at a school and there were all of these little posters stuck in the lawn that was all about being balanced, and all these different activities that were going on campus, so that students were not just studying all the time. So take pictures of them. I will give you one huge piece of advice. When you get to a new campus, the first picture should have the name of the school on it. Because if it doesn't, a lot of times it ends up with multiple red brick buildings, and one, like myself, cannot determine when we moved from Wake Forest to Elon. So try to take a picture of the name. Also grab a newspaper. You don't have to read it right then and there, but it's good to know, what the name of the newspaper is, so you can look it up online later, but also just to see what are students talking about on campus and what's important to them. All right, I love this one. Another counselor recommended this to me, is what she tells all of her students. Do the map test. Pull out a map or pull out your phone and look like you have no idea what's going on, and see how long it takes for somebody to help you. It actually tells you a lot about the students on campus and the campus culture. On almost every college campus that I went to, and I tried this, you know, within 2 minutes, a student is saying, hey, are you trying to find someplace? Can I help you find where you need to go? Sometimes they walk you to the building you're trying to go to, but it is a really good sort of barometer of sort of friendliness on campus. And the last one is get a card, or if you think you're going to lose the card, just take a picture of the card from the admissions rep, or sometimes actually the tour guide will give you their contact information. And those are two people that, again, as it gets closer to the, to applying, that you can ask questions to get more specific answers.
And then once you're done with your visit, here are just a couple of things that you can do after you visit to follow up. One, as Roxana said, write down your general impression right after you visit. After you leave, you may have some ideas about what you liked, what you disliked, but I think it's really important that when it's fresh in your mind, just write down your general impression and what stood out to you on campus. Give thanks. So if you met with a tour guide, if you met with someone on campus in terms of admissions, you can send a little thank you note because you have their card and you have their contact information because you remember to grab that from them. And you can email them and just say thank you to the people that you met on campus. Be specific. As we talked about earlier, the more specific that you can be in that moment, the better it is for you later when you have, if you have an interview or there's an admissions question that is specific to the school. Write down any activities or classes that you could see yourself getting involved with. I think it's really powerful in your applications to say, hey, when I was on campus, I saw this and I loved it. And then decide, make a decision. Is this school a yes, a no, or a maybe? Can you see yourself in this environment? Did it feel like that right fit? Can you imagine yourself there for 4 years? And then showing interest. So just continuing to show that demonstrated interest. Like them on Facebook, find their Instagram handle, open up and read the emails that they send you. All of that can show demonstrated interest.
So we're going to close with demonstrating interest, which gets a lot of press in terms of what schools are looking for. And yes, a lot of schools are using customer service software to track your contact with the college. Now, is UCLA doing that with all of their students? 90,000 students that are applying? No, they're not. In fact, in a lot of ways, the public institutions are not spending a lot of time making sure that kids are opening emails and trying to figure out who's going to come to the university versus not. Now, when you move to a little bit smaller institutions, which could be, 15,000, 12,000, and definitely private schools, right? They are really interested in getting a high yield, which means they want, with the students that they admit, they want the highest number possible to say yes, because that number, yield, goes into a lot of different things that are very important to the universities. It's everything from, moving them up in rankings, actually to being tied to their bond rating in terms of how much they can borrow money. So what they're trying to figure out is whether you actually might come to the institution. So that's the probability that they have enrollment managers that are sitting there trying to figure out, okay, can we offer admissions to the highest probability of students that are going to say yes? So what that means is exactly what Jenny said. Let me start this out. Do not overdo, right? I have worked in admissions. I don't need 7 emails, one every week about, why a student is so great. I would say demonstrating interest means that you have some legitimate questions that you genuinely are interested and that you couldn't find the information somewhere else. It means checking to see whether they do interviews or not. Interviews are a great way to demonstrate interest. It means if a school is really going to the top for you and you know that rep is going to be at a college night somewhere in the Bay Area, you might want to show up. Or my goodness, if they come to your school, if a particular school that is at the top of your list, or maybe even your top 5 comes to your school, take the time to go and visit. And if you can't go to their talk, send them an email and say, I'm really, really sorry. I have a calculus test. I won't be able to make it, but I wanted to let you know I'm very interested in attending Puget Sound. In terms of emails, this is kind of, this is like the developing part of it. Many schools are tracking whether you open the emails that they send to you, and then they're tracking where you go next. Now, I don't think any decisions in the back room of an admissions office are being made on this kid clicked through 7 pages on our website versus this kid clicked through 2. But at some point, if you have 2 identical students and one kid has never opened an email that Occidental has sent them, and another one has engaged in many different ways on campus, they're probably going to think that the one that's engaged with things on campus, both online and connecting with the admissions office, whether it's true or not, they are going to think that that student, the probability of that student attending the school is higher. Now, the other thing I would say is, dive in deep on demonstrated interest on every school on your list, right? You dive in deep on the ones that make the most sense, and you dive in deep on the ones that you're the most excited about. And that's something that we're here to kind of help you and guide you through. So that, my friends, is a very quick and dirty version of maximizing your college visit. So we're going to go ahead and end the presentation, but we will stay if folks have questions, and we'll unmute you. But if you have to get on to whatever's next, please feel free to go ahead and close out. I will be sending tomorrow, I will be sending out to everybody the recording if you want to look at that again. And then the group that's on the call already got just the list of what we talked about today for maximizing your college visits. So thank you so much for being with us this evening.